Oh, hello. Namaste. Got another episode of Sacred Synergy coming to you with Project Bring Me to Life. And my name is Jody. This month we are doing themes based off of nature. So we're going to be looking at nature-based religions today. So nature religions focus on the idea that God or gods can be experienced directly through nature and through natural objects. They're often considered pagan religions. Pagan religions are religions that are non-Abrahamic, so that would be like Christianity, Judaism, and Muslim religions. Um, there's a belief in deity that can be literal or non-literal. They can be conceptions such as like Green Man, because in nature religions, they always believe that God is found intrinsically in everything around us, not just humans, that there is life in the plants and the animals, in the rivers, in the mountains, and in the stars. So the nature religions also usually tend to see people as all inclusive and all at the same level. There isn't usually much of a hierarchy. And if there is a hierarchy, it's usually put into terms of temporary periods of leadership. So somebody may be a priest or a priestess for a season or for a period of time before passing that torch on to somebody else. This can be different with programs that are started like with covens. There may be somebody that starts a coven, so you may have a high priest that's set as the high priest for that coven as well. But it all depends on the flavor of the path that that person is on at the time. So each of them are a little bit different. Um, Also, most nature religions don't tend to put up a brick and mortar type structure. Usually they find church is in nature, so they'll go out into the woods, they'll go out into the open park, on the beach, anywhere where they can commune in nature. You can find possibly that they'll move some rocks around so that you can build like a circle or your altar for out in the woods, but they will even usually put those back into place so that nature remains untouched. I did hear, though, recently that the Norse actually have their very first temple, and so that is the first in the world that we have for in this age, modern times. But usually there is no structure that is permanent. Like the Native Americans will have a sweat lodge that is a purification ceremony for them, and that is only temporary as well, because the sweat lodge will be taken down, cleaned, it can be moved, but there's usually nothing that is a solid structure. First, I wanted to take a look at the Native American belief, lifestyle, way of life. It is something that is hard to be specifically defined because there are so many different tribes, there's so many different languages, and still so many different cultures that are different. I heard the funniest story the other day of a Navajo man who, the Navajo are afraid of owls, and he is married to a Hopi woman. So whenever his Hopi wife wants to, get at him, she'll show him a picture of an owl, and he'll go freaking out because the Navajo are afraid of owls. Where other tribes, there isn't that kind of like taboo being. But with the Native Americans, they use everything. Everything is nature. They use everything too. You don't see over hunting. They will only take what is necessary to help feed their tribe. And they do it in a very sacred way. Grandma Star tells a story about how one time she had went out to go hunting, and she had prayed for the animal that would be willing to sacrifice its life for the tribe to please step forward. So she's sitting there and she sees this amazing, beautiful buck that comes up and stands right in front of her. And she's just like, wow, she doesn't want to kill it because it's so beautiful. So she's just sitting there and kind of like admiring it and looking at it. And the deer became very, I don't know, it was telling her, like, go ahead, you've asked for me, take me, because he would stomp his feet, and he finally bowed his head down towards her, and he was letting her know, I'm the one that you asked for. So he was the one that presented himself to sacrifice itself for her tribe. So yeah, you won't see the Native Americans just going out and slaughtering a bunch of animals. They don't take the back strap off of a deer and throw the rest of it away. They use their hides for clothing and for moccasin. They use the bones for their arrowheads or for whatever type of tools that they need. They even use their guts for things like dyeing. So they use every part of that animal because everything is seen as sacred. With the Native Americans, the animals are very much a part of their way of life. Each one of them have their own medicine. So spider is called Iktomi in Lakota, and the spider is known for weaving its web of faith, but it's also known for being a little bit of a trickster. So they have a way that they work with the medicine of each animal, and they incorporate that into their own spirituality. There's something that I really, really love that's written by Chief Luther Standing Bear. I wanted to share that with you. It's called An Explanation of Native American Spirituality. It says, "The Indian loves to worship. From birth to death, he revered his surroundings. He considered himself born in the luxurious lap of Mother Earth, and no place was too humble for him. There was nothing between him and the big holy Wankantanka. The contact was immediate and personal, and the blessings of Wankatanka flowed over the Indian like rain showered from the sky. Wankatanka was not aloof, apart, and ever seeking to quell evil forces. He did not punish the animals and the birds, and likewise he did not punish man. He was not a punishing God, for there never was a question as to the supremacy of an evil power over and above the power of good. There was but one ruling power, and that was good." Okay, so the next thing that I would like to look at is also known as witchcraft, or we'll also talk about with Wicca as well, because a lot of people automatically assume whenever somebody says I'm a witch, that they're automatically Wiccan, and that's not necessarily true. There are lots of forms of witchcraft. There is Gardnerian, there is Buckland, those are all based around author type ideas. Then you have things like traditional witchcraft, and in traditional witchcraft, that was handed down through family lines. It was an oral tradition as well, like the Native Americans. It was passed down through a lineage. And with Wicca, it's more of a modern type religion where it's taken some of the old ways where they use the roots and they use plants and they use herbs and they use parts of nature for their healing. So Wicca is like a modern version of that, taking some of those aspects on and then also creating like a magic side with the ceremony. Um, like with Wicca, there will be people who um, of course, in Wicca, there's different deities. They're not all the same god or goddesses that are revered. Um, a lot of people are usually solitary, so they choose the pantheon that that they feel closest to, whether that is Celtic or it could be Druid, and Druidry is its own type of religion, but it's very, very similar as well. Um, so there's all these different options it's that you can patchwork among. With Wicca, you might have somebody who's like building a circle, so they'll put the rocks around at the different quarters, which are known as the elements, and they will call the watchtowers or they'll call the guardians of that direction, and they'll have the guardian stand there for protection with their circle. With traditional witchcraft, you're not going to have that type of circle that's being built. There's no coven or grove or the hierarchy that can be contained within that. Um, so with the four elements, this is something that you also find within nature religions. People pull in the elements of earth, air, fire, water, and also spirit can be included in that, although not everybody does. So the north is about earth, and of course that's going to be rocks and the dirt. So you usually will have some representation of earth on their altar. Um, to the south is fire, and that can be a representation of like, of course, a candle, or it could also be different spirit animals, like a gecko is known as a fire animal. To the east, we have air, and that is usually the color yellow. Green is earth, red is fire, yellow is air, and that can be wind. That's usually seen as wind. And then to the west, water, and that's blue. So there are the 4 elements that usually are brought within a ritual or a ceremony so that people can harness the energy of each of them to add power or potency to their spell work. And some people don't use that at all. Some people are more about their intent, because really a spell and spelling, you're just using your words to create what you want and harnessing any other type of energies that you want to for it. So it's pretty interesting way of life. If you've never studied it and you're interested, I suggest that you do so. Um, you don't have to worry about, there seems to be a little bit of discrimination from people who don't understand witchcraft, because for the longest time it was assumed that witches worship the devil. And that would be really hard to do because witches don't believe that the devil exists. Lucifer is a Judeo-Christian theory, so they don't believe that Lucifer is even really around to be worshipped. What you'll find ended up happening was with the Inquisition and the conquistadors, what they did was they came into the cultures and they found them worshiping deities like Pan or Ceranos, who are horned gods, and usually they were about fertility. So whenever the conquistadors or the Inquisition would come in, they would tell them that that was satanic and that they were worshiping the wrong god, so they would have them convert. And then a lot of times too, during that transition, they would take pagan aspects and turn them into Christian aspects so that it would be easier to kind of meld the two together so that they would be more likely to come into the fold. It's like a lot with the Catholicism, there's a lot of uses of incenses and things like that. It's kind of funny because everybody always talks about Easter, the Christian religion for Easter, and they're like, well, where did the rabbit come from and the egg? Because that doesn't really have much of a correlation with Jesus. But what you will find is that with the goddess Ostara, her symbolism was all about fertility. So she had an egg as one of her symbols, and also the rabbit, because the rabbit was known for fertility as well. As I was saying earlier about Druidry, it's another form of a nature-based religion, and Druidry is really interesting because they see that there is intrinsic life in everything as well, including the rocks and the trees. And they believe in overall the cultivation of wisdom and love. So they believe in reincarnation so that you can come back in several lives and build upon those types of virtues to become your fullest self. So they believe that it's possible that you can come back in a life and be a rock for hundreds of years and just experience life as a rock, or you could come back as a tree and do some of the things that trees do. So there's usually also a concept of reincarnation that goes on with nature-based religions. The last thing I wanted to touch on too is a religion called animism. And this is one that my business partner, Lindsay, really likes. So I wanted to include it as well. Animism is still continuing in a lot of tribal communities. It's in Shinto and a lot of the Eastern beliefs like Hinduism and Buddhism, and also the neo-pagan, new pagan type movements. And this is basically a belief that inanimate objects as well, like everything, has an aspect of God in them. They believe that revering the spirits of their ancestors are also very important because they still have influence over what's going on in our modern time. So I wanted to just end this off with a Cherokee blessing prayer because Cherokee is actually in my bloodline. So I thought this one was beautiful, and I hope that it carries you through till the next time. So it says, may the warm wind of heaven blow softly upon your house. May the Great Spirit bless all who enter there. May your moccasins make happy tracks in many snows, and may the rainbow always touch your shoulder. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful evening. Namaste.